Do people like the Pretenders?
Hey everybody, welcome back to Listography. Jason, Joe, Crams are here. Today we are counting down the now, as of Friday, 11 studio albums of the Pretenders. Great band. Would have loved to have gotten to them sooner, but I'm glad that I waited, that we can all do it together. Great discography. I know Joe didn't love this, but that's okay. That's part of the fun of it. You guys got any thoughts?
Joe, you get your 2 cents in because my cents will be worth more than 2, so you go ahead.
Okay. I mean, I really like some of their stuff, but I think they were on to something really good after the first 2 albums, and then they had the tragic deaths of 2 of their members, and they kind of went a different direction, and that worked. But I don't know, I feel like it's too much Chrissie Hynde sometimes and not enough kind of outside influence. I really like their singles. I think they're all pretty great. And the first 2 albums I didn't really like at first, and then they grew on me after repeated listens. So I can definitely, I definitely know why people like the Pretenders. There's no mystery. It's not like I think they're a bad group or Chrissie Hynde isn't worthy of a lot of praise. It's just not my style necessarily. So I'm going to probably have, not the nicest things to say about all the stuff, but there's nothing on here I hate. I'll say that. It's not like listening to Cut the Crap or something like that, where it's just like, ooh, why are we here? And they did grow on me a little bit during the listening. So I think it was a worthy exercise getting the whole discography in.
Good to know you're not flatlining over this. Whatever dismay you have about Pretenders, I will more than make up for. I like them far more than the average human being or music fan. And I know that the super purists of Pretenders, kind of after Pretenders 2, after the tragedy, don't fall in love with that stuff with the other lineups, but I've got gems from pretty much each lineup that Chrissie's putting out. I won't spoil it, but to me, the lack of continuity in the band members doesn't bother me at all. I think Chrissy's the star of the show, and it's her vision, and the sound is always kind of her idea as far as I'm concerned, and there's going to be great stuff for me from Eras. I'm excited to do this list. I'm excited to see what Jason has, because he likes Pretenders probably just as much as I do, but I think we're going to have very different lists. And then I'm also kind of excited to see how I get reactions from other diehard Pretenders, because I think towards the top of my list, I'm going to go against the grain a little bit, but we'll see. So I'm pumped. Let's get it started.
I think Pretenders have a handful, maybe 3 or 4 records that I consider great. Everything else is sort of really close to the same level, pretty good to very good, hard to separate and hard to order. But choosing number 11 at the bottom was easy. I think they have 1 record that I consider bad, and that is 2002's Loose Screw. Terrible production. 2 producers on this. I don't know who the one guy is, but the other guy is Kevin Bacon. So that should tell you all you need to know, really.
And that will be the last time we talk shit on Kevin Bacon. He's an American icon. No more.
The production's really bad. It's got that very of its time, early 2000s sound. The bass is way too fat, and the drums are all kind of filtered, either drum loops or just heavily processed drums. And the songs aren't just her best batch. They're not good enough to overcome the production flaws. I mean, bad is a relative term. I mean, there's certainly a ton of albums that I dislike more than this one, but in regards to the Pretenders catalog, this is the one that I would call bad.
Yes, I agree. It is also my number 11. This is one that's not on Spotify, so I had to search for it and get into Napster to find it. And I guess there's a reason that it's just, they don't even consider it worthy, because I can't remember a single thing about this album. I just remember not liking it. Nothing really stood out as far as this is much worse than the previous track. It was just nothing, absolutely nothing about this. Not the guitar, not the bass, not the drums, not Chrissie Hynde's vocals, not her songwriting. Nothing kind of works on this one. So I'm glad to see Jason also has it. So at number 11, so that means I'm not completely, I guess I know what I'm doing a little bit with the Pretenders if guess we both have that at number 11.
It's true. You do not have a screw loose. Loose screw is number 11. I'm actually fine with getting rid of the relativity within the context of their discography. This is a bad album. It's the only bad one they've got. I think number 11 is bad. I think 10 is kind of lousy. And then everything else I think is pretty good to amazing. Loose screw, if you watch the Aerosmith video, there is a sound I'm talking about from the Just Push Play album. And this is another one of those, like Jason was saying, has that terrible, tacky, early 2000s production with cheap mechanical pop vibes and that filtered Euro drum sound. You can hear it here, Just Push Play, U2's All That You Can't Leave Behind. There's probably a collective soul album in there that just have all this same garbage iTunes drum beat on it. I don't know what the hell it is, but it's terrible. There's no style on it. The songwriting is really lackluster. It's a bad kind of Chrissie Hynde solo adult pop rock album, and I don't want to say much more than that.
All right, all in agreement at the bottom. Maybe not for long though. Number 10 for me is Last of the Independents. So Martin Chambers returns as an official member on this record, although he only plays on about half the tracks or so. And between the previous record, Packed, and this one, you had the big grunge explosion, major changes to the rock landscape, and she just kind of feels like she's playing catch up here. You know, Packed was kind of, for the most part, a solo effort on, and this is kind of her trying to make Pretenders a band again, but it's not, and it's not working. It's kind of a move away from the pop of the last couple records towards a more muscular rock sound, but a lot of the songs are just okay, not super memorable, bad mid-90s production. You've got that really tight, kind of like almost piccolo snare sound. I don't like that at all. Tracks like I'm a Mother and Money Talk are some of the worst in the Pretenders catalog. There are some highlights. Night in My Veins is good. 977, All My Dreams. I'll Stand By You, probably the band's last sort of big hit. I like it. I think it's a good song. I think it's a great vocal performance, but I think the production is really just like overblown and too dramatic. And I don't know. It's not a bad record. Like I said, they only have one that I think is bad. This record's pretty good, but compared to the rest, I don't like it as much.
Well, I'm going to disagree with Jason on this one, so let's see where this goes.
Disagreeing in a big way, and this one might come to blows soon.
Okay. Well, for me, at number 10, I got Packed, which is basically a solo album that, I don't know, I think this one was like contractually obligated to release an album, and it feels really generic. The only song I really like on this is the Jimi Hendrix cover, May This Be Love. Everything else, like, it just, I don't know, it just kind of seems like going through the motions. I really dislike Downtown Akron, the kind of rehash of My City Was Gone, another Akron song, but this one's really not good at all. It's just, yeah, it just feels like there's just not a lot of passion or energy around this one. So did not dig Packed.
I'm already mad at Jason, so I'll apologize to you, buddy. I'm going to pick at you a little bit for the rest of the video. My number 10 is something that I'm going to bet Jason has pretty high up on his list just because it has that country feel that he loves. Yeah. Break Up Concrete, which I do not care for that much. It's not bad, but I think the vocals have a really poor mix. It's kind of muddy and displaced and pushed forward. I do like her ambition and effort here to come up with kind of a brand new sound and style. She dropped Chambers because allegedly she didn't think that he could do kind of her vision of that rustic country, alt country vibe. I like the lyrics a lot on Boots of Chinese Plastic and Nothing Maker, kind of like Don't Lose Faith in Me. Not terrible, but I think it's just too soft. It plays more like a Reba McEntire like sound rather than just an actual rock group. I'm right about this. So number 10, Break Up Concrete.
You're also right about it coming to blows because that's ridiculous. Number 9 is going to be the record Alone. She made, between Break Up the Concrete and this record Alone, she made an actual solo record which carries her name. She made it with Bjorn from Peter, Bjorn and John, and his stamp is all over that record. She returns to the Pretenders' name for Alone, but she continues sort of this streak that she's on where she chooses a producer and really lets the producer like mold the sound of the record rather than it being sort of her vision. And in the case of Alone, she's working with Dan Auerbach from the Black Keys. There's no other actual Pretenders on this. She's the only officially listed band member. You've got some studio musicians on here. Dan Auerbach himself plays a lot on it, and a lot of the instrumentation is also provided by the late, great Richard Swift. It's an interesting record, and I had a tough time deciding how good it was. There are a lot of things I like about it. Some of the guitar tones and the sound of the record is pretty cool, but I think Chrissie herself gets lost a bit in all of the production. You know, it's kind of a hard thing to make Chrissie Hynde sound anonymous, and this record kind of does that. So I don't know, it's not a Pretenders record to me, really. It's kind of a Dan Auerbach record with Chrissie Hynde singing on it. So I don't love it. It's not bad, again, but not what I would consider one of their better efforts.
Well, we are just all over the place. This might be the first band I can remember where we're all sort of just like completely, other than Loose Screw, I think we're going in wildly different directions.
This might be our breakup album, where it's like they never did another video after Pretenders.
Well, I'm going to keep that streak going, I think. Maybe with this one. I don't know. We'll see. My number 9 is going to be Get Close. For some reason, I thought I liked this album because I remember listening to Don't Get Me Wrong a lot and Room Full of Mirrors a lot. And I really liked those. And I don't know, when I went back and listened to the whole thing, it's just got this super 80s kind of complete change of direction from Learning to Crawl. And I don't get why she did this. It's just seems like a really weird kind of stab for that 80s sound, and for me it's a big mess, kind of buoyed by the couple of really good songs. I mean, Don't Get Me Wrong is phenomenal, and I like the Hendrix cover again. But other than that, I was not digging the shift to the 80s sound. I really like what they did on Learning to Crawl, and the fact that they completely went away for that, it doesn't work for me on this one. One of their more popular ones, I guess, but yeah, I don't like the direction they were going with on this one.
Yeah, I totally disagree, but this is good. This is good. We're talking things through. I will say this. I do think they have a lot of kind of unexpected tonal shifts, or she does rather, from album to album, like what I was just talking about with Breakup Concrete. I always admire those, like a lot of different sounding albums within the 11, which I give credit to. Always, never really satisfied, always trying something new. Whether it works or not, I always at least give a thumbs up to the prospect of that. My number 9 is going to be Pact. 9 and up for me are all albums that I would recommend. I don't think this is a bad album. I think it's pretty good, not very good or anything better than that. I like Let's Make a Pact. Millionaires is cool. I agree, I'm not into Downtown Akron. I think my favorite song on it is the Johnny Marr appearance on When Will I See You. But it does, other than Breakup Concrete, to me, this is the one that kind of feels like a solo album. It's jangly and a little boring at times. There's really no edge. It's a bit songwriting by numbers. I think almost going through the motions, putting out an album just to get it out. And I think it'll be greatly improved on after that. So number 9 for me is Pact.
All right, number 8 for me. We're not all totally all over the place because I'm with Joe a little bit. I've got Get Close at number 8. So, you had the death of the 2 band members after Pretenders 2. Somehow miraculously, she pulls things together for Learning to Crawl, but I think it was, the pressure and the weight of things were starting to really, she was starting to feel it on this record. She basically fired Martin Chambers during the making of this record. You've got a bunch of session players. There are a few songs on here that are great, that kind of really stand up to the best tracks on the first 3 records. My Baby and Don't Get Me Wrong are highlights. I think Chill Factor is pretty good, so is Him to Her. But the lows on this record are some of the lowest, I think, in their catalog, and that's what holds it down for me. They're sort of like these dance, funk, 80s experiments that don't work at all, like the track Dance and How Much Did You Get for Your Soul. I think, if not the 2 worst songs, they're both probably in the bottom 5 worst Pretenders songs. And the rest of the record, aside from those lowlights and the highlights, is kind of hit and miss. It's just not a consistent enough record to be considered one of their best.
I'm glad I'm not alone on that one. Speaking of alone, that is my number 8. Great transition by me there. I'm kind of with what Jason said about it. I liked it at first, and then it was like, okay, is this really like Pretenders, or is this Dan Auerbach kind of just putting his stamp on Chrissie Hynde's vocals? And it does feel like that. I didn't dislike the record, and really from here on up, I liked all of the albums. I like this one. Keeps a little bit of that Americana, but it just sounds a little bit too much like Black Keys, kind of light and that kind of general sound, which is fine in some cases, but it just didn't quite get me on this one. A little too much Dan, not enough Chrissie on Alone.
Before I reveal my number 8, I'm just going to throw a flyer out there halfway through the video. Friday, they had a new album out, and it has not made the bottom 4 for any of us yet, so pretty impressive. And it might not be mentioned for a while, but it's just good to know that, you know, a band or an artist that's 30 plus years old came out with something within the last few days that we're all pretty much like, not bad. All right, my number 8, and I'm going to stress that I really like this record, is going to be Viva El Amor. I don't have a lot to complain about it. I'm going to nitpick. I really like it. I love Pretenders, so it's got kind of that 60s revival, fuzzy late 90s sound. I think Pop Star is great and a tremendous opener. I love it. I just think the problem I have with it is just a little bit of the songwriting is just a little bit too uninventive. The instruments are a bit faint. The songs are a little too sweet and refined for Pretenders for me. I like Human a lot. And then like on a song like Who's Who, it's got these little shimmery production details that I'm not crazy about on this album. But I do think she's got a really amazing vocal performance in Dragway 42. I like how raw Legalize Me is, and the guitars kind of let go. I wish there was a little bit more of that on the album. And I love Biker as a closer. I think it's perfect closer. I think starting with Pop Star and ending with Biker is a great way to start and complete the album. The songs I didn't really mention are a little bit of filler for me, and I stress the word little bit. I do like this album a good bit, but I like 7 more, so Viva El Amor.
Okay, my number 7 is going to be Packed. On the previous album, Get Close, you know, the band's crumbling. I don't know, she's trying to like hang on to this idea that the Pretenders are actually a band, when in fact they're not really. Here on Packed, she kind of leans into the fact that Pretenders is really just a vehicle for her own songwriting now. This is really a solo album, you know, and it doesn't really try so hard to convince you otherwise. It sticks pretty much to the sort of jangly, catchy pop throughout the whole record. Not a lot of her really trying to rock out a lot. And I will say there's not really a lot of high highs to this record, not really any songs that I absolutely love, but it does avoid pretty much any major missteps. I think it's pretty good the whole way through. It's worth noting that Blair Cunningham, although he's not listed as a band member, he does play drums on every single track. My favorite 2 songs on this are probably Never Do That and Sense of Purpose.
Well, Kramser just talked about Hate for Sale, and here it is on my list at number 7. Pretty solid, you know, for a band that 40 years basically since Pretenders 1 came out. This is pretty impressive for that kind of length of time. I really like Hate for Sale, the track. I think it starts out, got this kind of punky vibe that kind of harkens back to the debut and the first couple of records. And I kind of wish she had gone more with that direction, but there's some other good stuff. The Buzz, Lightning Man, Turf Accountant Daddy. First half is real solid. Junkie Walk I didn't like, but other than that, I think it ends well with Crying in Public, kind of a ballad. And I mean, it's a good song, but it's a good album. It's not my favorite, but it's a solid 40 years down the road. If any artist can make this album 40 years after they debut, they must be doing something right.
Wow, Joe, it's literally like you read my notes, because I'm without new things to say. Hate for Sale is my number 7. And when I was listening to it, which was yesterday, I was so excited for you, and I was hoping, I hope Joe at least thinks this record is pretty good, because if you watched our Best of 2020 video, Joe is just longing for some hard rock and some old school rock and roll, and this is pretty much what you're going to get right now. And I think it's pretty impressive in that it's got those hard rock elements that were on Alone a little bit. To me, the standout here is the bass playing. There's a lot of really good Entwistle-esque kind of bass that's weaving in and out of just like straight up rock beats. It's got a really cool thrash and crash, soaring, static guitar, amped up feel. Hate for Sale is a great track. It's got those like roller coaster tones on it. Cool bar rock feel. It's really loose but unified rock playing. Joe's right. The first half is really good. The second half is pretty good. I also do not like Junkie Walk. I found it kind of annoying, and I loved Crying in Public as the closer. There were some really cool surprises on this album too. The reggae-ness, which they've done a couple of tracks earlier on Lightning Man, is cool. And then out of nowhere, you get that 70s sci-fi synth solo, like in Turf Accountant Daddy. I was just like, whoa, that was pretty cool. This was a very pleasant surprise in their catalog and for 2020. So number 7 for me, Hate for Sale.
Okay. My number 6, I'm not to the new one yet. I've got Viva El Amor. I agree with the general idea of the things you said about it, Cram, but when it comes to specifics, I disagree. It opens with Pop Star, and I think that is the worst song on the record and one of the worst Pretenders songs. I kind of like the lyrics about how terrible, modern pop stars are, but the production uses all the same tricks as modern pop stars, which I get. Maybe it's part of the joke. She's being kind of tongue-in-cheek, but it doesn't work, and doesn't sound good at all. Don't enjoy it. I think it's a terrible opener, but after that, things really get rolling. There's a bunch of good songs in a row from there through the rest of the record. She does a cover of the Divinals track Human, which is really good. There's still questionable production here and there throughout the record, but unlike Loose Screw, I think on this record, the songs are good enough that they can withstand some missteps as far as the production goes. I like Nails in the Road a lot, and Baby's Breath. I think those are really cool tracks. And I think she turns in one of her all-time best vocal performances with One More Time. So yeah, overall a very, very solid record.
Yeah, you can kind of hear it almost teetering into that awful territory with that late 90s, early 2000s sound, which we all agree was all over Loose Screw.
Yeah.
Alrighty, so we're getting down, I guess we're halfway through-ish to my number 6, which is going to be last of the Independents. I think it just comes down to Jason hates the 90s sound, the 90s production, all that, and I don't. I like it. In some cases, I don't think it sounds bad on this one. I think kind of the guitars get amped up a little bit, which I like. Good energy. Kind of hear that kind of maybe grunge, post-grunge sound creeping in. It's 94, so you're going to have that. But I really like the songwriting, Money Talk, All My Dreams, Stand By You, all good songs. 977 is really good. I don't really like the cover of Bob Dylan's Forever Young, but other than that, Stand By You is really strong, good kind of single. Night in My Veins, Hollywood Perfume. There's nothing other than I'm a Mother, which I really do not like, and Forever Young. I think everything else rocks pretty hard. I think I like kind of the return to that amped up guitar sound, and maybe that kind of influences me a bit more because on a lot of these albums, Chrissie Hynde kind of sounds the same. Her songwriting's usually pretty strong. So a lot of times it just kind of comes down to the guitars and the music. I think this one's better than, half of them or so. So I like this one, Last of the Independents, my number 6.
My number 6 is going to be Alone. Yeah, it's got that old classic rock revival that Dan Auerbach brings, but you're throwing in some R&B in a little bit. I don't have a problem with it. To me, it's like he's only credited as a songwriter, I think, on 2 of the tracks. I know like his influence is all over it. To me, the highlights of this album are some of the slower songs, like Blue-Eyed Sky, Never Be Together. I love Let's Get Lost. Hate Myself is really good. It's got, kind of that more distant reverb sound to it. Roadie Man is kind of cool, longing, and seductive. Alone right off the bat is really cool. It's got that early Pretenders, Chrissie Hynde, like spoken word cadence and directive nature to it. I think it's a cool, like youthful, energetic, stiff album, and I don't have much to complain about it. If the big complaint is that it doesn't sound like classic Pretenders, it's like, well, it's 35 years after the fact, and she's still putting out really good stuff under this label with, a bit of a collaborative effort, but the results are great. So I've got nothing to complain about it. I think it's a really good album, and I think just an outlier of the top 5, and my top 5 are what I consider incredibly good albums. So Alone, number 6.
All right, into the top 5 now, and I've got the new one, Hate for Sale. Really good record, as you guys said. It's short, it's to the point, it's only like 30 minutes long. It sounds, sonically, it sounds more like classic era Pretenders than pretty much anything that she's done since the classic era. I mean, Martin Chambers is back again. I don't love every song on it, but the good ones are really, really good. I really like The Buzz, You Can't Hurt a Fool, Maybe Love is in New York City I like a lot. But yeah, everything else you guys said is spot on. It's really impressive for a record this good to come out this deep into someone's career. So kudos to them.
It kind of sounds like we're judging on different scales. Like I like all these albums, don't get me wrong, but like maybe you guys are probably like a letter grade kind of above where I am. So for my number 5, I have Viva El Amor, and I liked it. I kind of like kind of the heavy sound again. Dragway 42 and Baby's Breath are really good. I like the cover of Divinal's Human. Pop Stars, I don't hate it as much as Jason or like as much as Cramser, somewhere in the middle. And I think it's just a pretty good, if kind of similar sounding, mid-tempo, late 90s kind of stuff. I think I would recommend someone listen to all of these albums. I don't hate them, but we still haven't got to like where I would consider like a great album yet, and we're not quite gonna get there for a little while still. So these are all good for me, but still kind of outside of the kind of upper echelon of great albums, I think.
Well, for me, number 5, we are entering great territory here. My number 5 is going to be Pretenders 2. It's a lot like the first one in its sound and its playing with the original members, except it's more melodic. It's less wild and unpredictable than the first one, which I think hurts it a little bit. But there's without a doubt some great stuff on here, and there's absolutely no weak tracks to me. To me, the highlight of it is probably the Kinks cover, I Go to Sleep. I really like it. Although I'm not crazy about the sequencing with Birds of Paradise coming right out of that. And then Talk of the Town. Kind of when I'm listening to it, by the time Pack It Up hits, I'm like desperate for a little bit more energy, and it comes. So it's kind of last minute, perfect timing, and I love Pack It Up. Message of Love is great. I like English Roses. I think she sounds great. I just think it's a little bit too traditional and constructed compared to the first one, which is what I love about the original lineup. But this is a really damn good record. It's got that classic new wave jangly guitar sound with a ton of arpeggios, and it's great. She sounds great. She is a little bit more melodic with the vocals and the singing. Like I said, there's a lot more like spoken words kind of stuff. A lot more punk vibe on the first one, I would say. But this is a really darn good record. Pretenders 2, number 5.
My number 4, Pretenders 2. I don't know that I would call this quite a great record, but it's a very, very good record. Like Cram said, it's not as immediate or undeniable as the debut. There's definitely, weak tracks here and there. I think the way it opens with Adulteress and Bad Boys Get Spanked is those are both kind of clunky rockers that I don't like very much. But then you get into a nice run of some really great tracks. You've got Message of Love, which is awesome. I Go to Sleep, the Kinks cover is really good. I like Birds of Paradise a lot and Talk of the Town. Then the back half of the record's also kind of hit and miss after that. So I think the highlights are extremely, extremely good on this record. It's just not as consistent as the 3 records that I have ahead of it. But yeah, really good record.
I'm a little surprised at both of your positions for that one. Not going to lie there. But moving on to my number 4, we got Break Up the Concrete. I think this is the first one I like. I'm fine with that kind of sound that they started with on kind of Packed. And pretty much everything up until Break Up the Concrete was kind of that same sound. I was kind of sick of it. Break Up the Concrete was definitely kind of my first listen to it, which was during this discography. I wasn't expecting the kind of country Americana sound, which I really like. I mean, I like that sound in general, and I think they pull it off really well. There's a little bit of that kind of like boogie woogie guitar with the Americana sounding. Boots of Chinese Plastic, Don't Lose Faith in Me, Love's a Mystery, Don't Cut Your Hair, Break Up Concrete, the track, I really liked them. The songwriting it's different. I mean, that's kind of what got to me first, is that it does sound different. They are trying something new. And I mean, Chrissie Hynde just has such a great voice that it's sort of a natural thing for her to try this type of music. And I'm glad they did, because this is pretty close to a great album in my opinion. So Break Up the Concrete is my number 4.
I get it, especially with you two. I love Americana and that sound too, not as much as you guys, but I never dislike it. I do find it phony sometimes when people are just kind of doing it, and I kind of felt that way about Breaking Up the Concrete. But that said, I didn't hate it. Number 4 for me is going to be Get Close. I have no problems with your criticisms of it. And I mean that in a way that I acknowledge your criticisms, but to me, they're strengths. I think this is a beautiful, pretty, overly produced 80s album. It's sentimental. It's, got that new wave romance feel. It's twilighty. It's got that thin, majestic guitar sound to it. I love the jangliness of the guitars and the layering of it right off my baby. Really angelic. I've got no problems with the experimental stuff, like with Dance. Don't Get Me Wrong is great. Chill Factor to me is the weakest song on it. I love Him to Her. I think she does this like soft rock vocal performance on some of the tracks just absolutely perfectly. And then ending with Room Full of Mirrors. What a cool version, and it sounds amazing. It's got like that U2 echoing like rhythm guitar behind it, and then the piercing like guitar lead. I love the production on it. I've got no problems with it. The synth layering makes it sound like a Cars album sometime. At times it sounds like it's like a Cure, like with happy-go-lucky bass on it. I think the vocals and everything here are a lot different than everything else they've done. And it all works for me. And that, to me, that's just the strength of her as a writer and as a performer. And I mean, I know a lot of Pretenders fans are kind of split on this. A lot of people really like it and a lot of people don't. But to me, this is like a no-brainer. I've got no problem with this, especially like what I was talking about before, when you kind of just settle in with the fact that this is her band. And unfortunately, the original lineup and that original style is just not going to happen after Pretenders 2. I think it's great.
My number 3, I was very tempted to put this at number 2, but I'm not, although it might be their second best record, Break Up the Concrete. So she takes a number of years off. I think it was 6 years after Loose Screw between the 2 records, and I think she just comes back with a vengeance, a whole new sound, the best song she's written since Learning to Crawl, I think. I think the songwriting is incredibly consistent throughout the whole record. She's got a new lineup again. She's got a new sound with this sort of Americana alt country thing going on. It sounds like there's a lot of sort of Lucinda Williams inspiration behind this record. She even goes as far to include a pedal steel player as an actual member of the band. I think it's a great direction that works really well. I wish she continued down this path for more records. I think it feels really authentic. Like I said, the songs are great. And like the new record, it kind of gets in and gets out. It's only 37 minutes long, doesn't overstay its welcome. I think the playing on it's really great. The guitar playing and the pedal steel playing is just really, really good and tasteful. I think there's probably a lot of Pretenders fans that didn't ride out the whole discography with them, that may have jumped ship somewhere in the 80s or 90s. If you don't know their late period stuff and you're interested, this is the one I would recommend going to. I think it's fantastic.
Well said, Jason. I couldn't agree more. But now for me, we're on to like the 3 kind of essential Pretenders albums that everyone should listen to. And I'd never heard this one before we started doing this listography. I probably listened to this one the most because I found it super interesting. Like the sound, it's like the first one, but kind of the rough edges are smoothed out a little bit. The guitars are a little less kind of new wave jangly, a little more focused, a little harder, which I liked. I think if you kind of combined Chrissie Hynde's kind of raunchiness, her lyrics on the first album, with the sound of this one, I think it would be a perfect album, because The Adulteress and Bad Boys Get Spanked, kind of trying to recreate that magic from the first album, doesn't quite work. But Message of Love, the Kinks cover, I Go to Sleep, is phenomenal. Pack It Up, Day After Day, all really strong, really good songs. And in general, I like the sound of this probably the best of all their albums. And I really wish it was after this one that Pete Farndon and James Honeyman-Scott died, kind of within weeks of each other, I think. Kind of derailed the direction, because I think if they had one more album with this kind of lineup, I think it would have been their best work. So it's a really good album nonetheless, and something, everyone should listen to. It was kind of, people didn't like it as much at first. It kind of was in the shadow of their debut, and it kind of didn't get the same critical acclaim. The record sales were a lot lower, but it's a really cool album, and it's definitely worth listening to.
My number 3 is going to break some hearts. It's the debut, Pretenders. That said, I might like it more than either of you guys. I love it. It came out in a loaded year, 1979. It's just fantastic. And then the album that I haven't mentioned before it, at number 2 or 1, isn't anything nitpicky about Pretenders, the album. It's just that I really love the other 2 above this just a little bit more. But albums 3, 2, and 1 for me are all 4 out of 4 stars. So just take that to heart. This is, picking between the 3 children. Pretenders' debut is just awesome. You haven't really heard anything like it. It's a combination of punk and hard rock and new wave. And my favorite thing about it is just how disjointed and unconventional these songs are put together. It's just really good, just unpredictable twists and turns and little nuances and details from verse to verse, refrain to refrain, chorus and chorus. Nothing ever sounds the same 45 seconds after you thought you heard the verse the first time. The coolest thing, I have a hard time explaining this album. To me, the coolest thing is this album and the feel of the album gets stuck in your head. But to me, really, other than Brass and Pocket, none of the songs really get stuck in your head, but the whole album does. It's just like, you're just like, you want to go back and listen to it. Precious is amazing. It's everything you want to know about Chrissie's bravado right off the bat, her just cadence and directive command of the frontman quality she does right off the bat, like 40 seconds into this. She's all over the place. She's got you in the palm of her hand. It is a tremendous album. It's almost like these songs are like little punk rock prog albums with the way they kind of move. The phone call kind of jumps and it's choppy and catches up to itself and collects itself. It's so cool. There's not a bad song on it. Kid is, a highlight up the neck. I love Phone Call. Space Invader is amazing. It's weird. It's awesome. The guitars are great. I think it's got a really cool sequencing to it. The whole album is really unconventional and awesome at the same time. The vocal mix on Stop Your Sobbing is tremendous. It's a fantastic album. I thought it would be my number 2. My number 1 was already slated, and it's just really the strength of what I have at number 2. I've got no problems with this. I've got no problems with people having it at number 1. I've got no problems with people giving me shit, but it's fantastic. Pretenders' debut, number 3. One of the best debuts of all time.
My number 2 is going to be Learning to Crawl. I think given the circumstances, it's amazing that this band even continued at all. And to put out an album of this quality is pretty unbelievable. In some ways, it might be better than the debut. It's more direct, it's more concise, it's more cohesive, it's a little poppier. But to me, it lacks sort of that aggressive snarl that the first album has. I think Chrissie had really something to prove on the first record, and it was like she was kicking the door in, and it was just awesome. And this record's missing a little bit of that. It plays it a little safe in spots. Still think it's really great. Essential listening if you like the Pretenders, but not the best.
Well, for me, these last 2 are they're so different. It's kind of wild that this is, 3 years apart that they came out. For my number 2, I have Pretenders 1, the debut. I mean, it's probably a better album than Learning to Crawl because it's just so completely unique and just out of the blue. I mean, nothing has ever sounded like this before. The first time I listened to it, I was like, what is even going on? I didn't like it at first, and I had to listen to it a bunch to kind of get it. But, it's Chrissie Hynde is basically, like Jason said, like she's announcing herself to the world that she's just, she can sing with the boys, she can talk dirty, she can be raunchy. It's punky and jittery. The singing is great. The songs are all over the place. You have the instrumental Space Invader, you have the perfect pop song in Brass and Pocket, and you have stuff like Up the Neck and The Phone Call, Tattooed Love Boys, just kind of those songs could not be more different if they tried. A Kinks cover in Stop Your Sobbing. It's a really cool listen, even if it's my number 2 because it's not my style. It's probably their best, but it's just not, it's not what I would normally gravitate to. And it had to be really good for me to have it this high. And it definitely is. It's something everyone has to listen to at least once or twice in their life.
Agreed. Like I said, I love it. My number 2 is going to be Last of the Independents, which I think is a bit of a favorite for me, of album of the year of 94. This is how much I love it, and I think it's one of the most unheralded records of 94. Or of the 90s, really. It plays right to my personal taste. It's got that 90s jangly sound. She's really melodic on top of this really aggressive rock on top, like in the background. It's just kind of a perfect fit for me, and her vocal performances are great, and the album just plays great for me. Hollywood Perfume and The Night in My Veins. I do agree with Jason that Money Talk is one of the weaker Pretenders track. I totally disagree with both of you about I'm a Mother. I think it's one of the coolest, weirdest, just different songs that they do. I think I'll Stand By You is just phenomenal and lovely. Love Colors is great. 977 is amazing. Revolution, it to me is just an amazing, simple 90s rock album. And I kind of know that I'm contradicting myself when we were talking about inventiveness and originality, and Jason was saying that doesn't matter. And to me, this is an argument that I would agree with Jason on. There's not a lot of different territory here. This is just a 90s jangly rock album. But to me, it's just perfect in every single way. I think it's tremendous. From start to finish, I just think it's a better listen than The Pretenders. I think it is one of the best albums of the 90s, one of the more underrated things. And I don't understand, and I can't explain, so please don't ask me, why I think the playing on this album is so good. It has a whole band feel that I think it was lacking, which doesn't make any sense because there's just musicians all over the place. So to me, it's kind of a credit to Seymour and Chrissie herself to just kind of narrowing in, bringing in people and being like, this is what I want. I think the direction they were giving people on this album just came out perfect. Everyone kind of rallied behind them because there's so many different players on this, but it just works for me. I don't know how else to explain it. I think Last of Independence is great. I know a lot of Pretenders fans really like it. I know a lot of people think it's just kind of okay, but I'm with those people that are like, this is a return to form. It's like the Learning to Crawl of the 90s for me. So just tremendous pop rock for me. Number 2, Last of the Independents.
Well, for me, I'm in the it's just kind of okay camp. But you know, if it's a personal favorite for someone, that's great. You can definitely make the argument that it's a really good record. Putting it ahead of the debut, though, is a little unforgivable.
Is it as unforgivable about Wish You Were Here at number 8, though?
Oh yeah, it's way more unforgivable.
It's better than the debut. I don't know what to tell you. I like it more.
Number 1, the best Pretenders album. Not really even that close for me. It's the debut. Classic. One of the best debut albums ever. Punk energy, punk attitude with new wave melodicism and classic pop songcraft. It's got, you know, the band's short-lived classic lineup. It's more muscular and versatile than any other future iteration of the band. It shows sort of the multiple sides of the band really well. You've got like the really hard rocking kind of forward thinking new wave kind of stuff like Precious and The Phone Call and Up the Neck. The back half gets a little janglier, a little poppier, Stop Your Sobbing, Kid, Brass and Pocket, Lovers of Today. I think it's easily their best collection of songs, easily their best performances, and also easily her best vocal performances. Just the attitude and the way she delivers these songs is unbelievable. Yeah, one of the best records of the late 70s, early 80s. Just about as good as it gets. So, got to be my number 1.
Yeah, it's a good one. I mean, it's good. I can see why all the critics loved it and kind of
course.
Named it there, you know, fit well with the times. For me, though, Learning to Crawl just has a better kind of me sound. It fits me better. It fits the style I like. Middle of the Road and Back on the Chain Gang, 2,000 Miles, My City Was Gone, all just kind of perfectly crafted rock, but plenty of kind of pop hooks in there. And this is her first one without the 2 founding members who died. And like I think we've discussed before, the fact that she was able to pull this together after that speaks volumes about her. You know, the whole album's really good, except Washing the Clothes, which I really dislike. Kind of a weird throwback. But everything else is kind of perfect. Just super good vocal performances. I don't know who's the main guitarist on this. Robbie McIntosh, Malcolm Foster on bass, Martin Chambers again on drums, original. And it just all works. I think, Back on the Chain Gang, definitely one of my all-time favorites. I have a problem with My City Is Gone because it was the theme song to Rush Limbaugh, and I hear that and I make that connection, so I can't really listen to it. It's a good song, but that connection isn't a great one for me. But other than that, no real flaws other than washing the clothes. It's a really good album. Simple as that. That's why it's my number one.
Also my number one. And again, I'm just going to reiterate that Pretender's debut is amazing. It's a fine choice. This was an interesting listography for us to do because I think we've kind of broken some of our own rules and standards or definitions of our taste. To me, like Jason, as someone that says he almost always prefers craft over style or message, this is the best crafted album they've got. It's absolutely fantastic. All of the songs are just perfect. And Robbie McIntosh is just a revelation on guitar, just fantastic. And it's also very me, like middle of the road. Two of my favorite guitar sections ever. The solo is fantastic. And then just one of the best arpeggio riffs ever. It's just fantastic. And it's a bit more of a simple approach. It's just kind of them meddled down into what they could be as a straight up pop rock group. It's groovy. It's got tremendous rhythm all over. Every song you're either nodding your head, banging your head, tapping your foot, snapping, swaying your hips. It's 1 through 10. There's not a bad moment on this. It's one of just the best guitar forward pop rocks ever with a little bit of variety in it. Straight ahead hard rock, softer stuff like Back on the Chain Gang, which is a little prettier. Thumbelina, which has that more country rockabilly feel to it. I mean, I Hurt You is probably the most emotional song on it. It's just a tremendous album. What year was this? 84? 84 is a loaded year, I know, going in, but it's got to be up there for me. This has been my favorite Pretenders album forever. And it was the first one I've listened to, and I've grown to love them. So this is like the core of me loving Pretenders. Nothing ever took over the number one spot for me after all this time, and I think rightfully so. But Pretenders original was great. I don't think Pretenders 2 gets enough credit. I think they're a tremendous band. I mean, doing this, I've listened to all of their stuff. The only new stuff I listen to now was Alone and obviously Hate for Sale. I mean, they haven't lost a touch for me. I love Pretenders. This was great.
Yeah, I'm with you. I really enjoyed listening to all of these. Even sometimes when we do bands that I like a lot, if they have a lot of records, by the time I get to the end of it, I'm totally sick of listening to them. And that was not the case with Pretenders for me. Would have been interesting to see, what they could have done with if the original lineup stayed together longer. But yeah, great band. I'm with you on that.
I was sick of them by the end. But not so much the new one, but Break Up the Concrete was good. And then that kind of reinvigorated me a little bit. But I found it a bit of a slog. Not my favorite kind of, back end of the discography for me. But each their own. Like, Chrissie Hynde's still great. We can all agree on that.
For sure. All right. Well, check in with us tomorrow. We're going to be counting down our top 10 favorite Pretender songs each. And then for side 3 this week, we're going to list some of our favorite debut albums of all time, given that Pretenders 1 is such a strong effort. And then Friday we got 1975, so a lot of good stuff coming up. Be sure to hit the like, subscribe, hit the bell to get notifications, and we will see you in the next one.